The League of Women Voters, East Shore, and Branford Community Television proudly present the 12th State Senate District Candidates Debate, featuring Democratic candidate Christine Cohen and Republican candidate Adam Greenberg. And now, here's your moderator, Ken Bennett.
Hello, and welcome to the Candidates Debate, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of the East Shore and DCTV. The two candidates for state senator in the open seat for the 12th district are Democrat Christine Cohen and Republican Adam Greenberg. Questions used in this debate were prepared by the local league or screened by them if submitted by the public. A drawing has determined the order in which the candidates will speak. Each candidate will have 1 minute to state his or her qualifications for the elected position, followed by 2-minute responses to each question. After each candidate has responded to a question, each may take an additional minute to add information or to counter statements made by another candidate. Additional time will be allotted equally upon request. Finally, each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. We will begin by asking the candidates to take 1 minute to summarize their qualifications for becoming the next 12th District State Senator. Mrs. Cohen, first, please.
Well, I've grown up in Connecticut most of my life, spent here, attended Connecticut public schools, graduated from a Connecticut State University, worked for a Connecticut-born and based Fortune 500 company, and even created my own Connecticut-based company right here in the 12th District. I've dedicated my life to the community and most recently have been serving on the Guilford Board of Education, presenting bipartisan and balanced budgets year over year. I love this state, but there's no doubt it's a little under the weather. We have the medicines, however, to get it back to good. And just like we wouldn't turn our back on a sick child, we will not turn our back on Connecticut. We're going to remove barriers to business growth and development. We are going to improve infrastructure. We're going to protect our most valued assets, our education and environment. And together with you, by listening, collaborating, and cooperating, we are going to move Connecticut forward.
Mr. Greenberg.
Connecticut has been knocked down. I have been knocked down. I grew up right here in Guilford, Connecticut. Born and raised, went through the Guilford public school systems, graduated from Guilford High. I made it to the major leagues, and in my first pitch, a 92-mile-an-hour fastball struck me in the back of the head on a nationally televised game. What knocked me down certainly didn't knock me out. Through 7 years of hard work, dedication, and perseverance, I got back up and made it back again to the top of the major leagues. As a business owner and business leader and the CEO of a nationwide health and wellness company, I motivate and inspire and change lives on a daily basis. I also do motivational speaking nationally, from elementary straight up through Fortune 500 companies. It's pretty remarkable to be here in front of all of you in my hometown where I was born and raised and given so much by the people here in this community. And I am so proud and excited to have this opportunity to represent the district that I was born and raised in and the district that I now live in with my 2 sons and my wife, Lindsay.
Question 1 for Mrs. Cohen. Can you suggest ways of increasing the state's revenue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to look to growth. As a business owner, I have had to increase my market share year over year to thrive in our economy, and we need to do the same thing here in Connecticut. We do that by removing barriers to business entry and growth in the state. We make sure that we concentrate on improved infrastructure, and we look to protecting the environment as education, as I had mentioned in my opening statement. We need to protect those valuable assets while looking to growth in the state. And there's so many barriers to business entry and growth, many regulatory barriers that are industry specific, but certainly barriers that affect each and every one of us every day, such as the rising cost of health insurance. So that is my immediate priority, is making sure that we do all we can to prioritize business in this state and look to grow our way out of this fiscal issue that we have now.
Mr. Greenberg.
As a business owner, I understand I must be competitive. And as a state, Connecticut is not even close to being competitive with our surrounding states and the rest of the country. Our infrastructure is failing, but we also have 9,000 business regulations and roughly 300 taxes. We have a closed welcome center. We have a tourism budget that's embarrassing. What we need to do is work with our businesses and help deregulate, not at the expense of the environment, but to create Connecticut as a competitive place to do business. Connecticut has looked at its businesses here in the state from a predatorial standpoint. What can I get from these businesses? And the last straw should have been for all of us when GE left after we imposed an $80 million tax. And they finally said enough's enough. If we're going to bring Connecticut back and grow our way out of this, it's going to take common sense business practice. Reduce business regulations, improve our infrastructure, utilize the amazing resources we have, tell the story of Connecticut through tourism, welcome people into this state, and not just rely on a gas tax and consider ourselves as a pass-through state. We need to be winners, and we need the right attitude and mentality in order to do that. And that's what I feel I can bring to the state of Connecticut in the District 12.
For the first rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen.
Yeah, I would just add to my previous statement that we really need to focus in on 500 and fewer employee-sized businesses. That's where we can really create some job generators and talk about what is it that's preventing you from coming into the state. Again, I'll go back to health insurance. Health insurance seems to be the #1 barrier. I know it is for me. I pay $1,500 a month with a $15,000 deductible. I was always able to provide my employees with health insurance in the past, and over the years I've become unable to do so. So we really need to look at that. We need to be exploring a public option right here in the state of Connecticut that will not only help businesses enter the market, it will help them grow and thrive, and will certainly help individuals outside of business as well. It will make us a more competitive state. It will make people want to come here, live, and grow their families here.
Second rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
We know why businesses are leaving. We know why businesses are not coming, and we know why businesses are not starting here. It's the 9,000 roughly business regulations that we have and the excessive high cost of living. I've already started this process here in the 12th District by unifying and bringing people together. I'm formulating a team here in the 12th with town leaders, developers, economic developers, people from across the great universities that we have, pulling their wonderful minds together to create an environment that's going to lure and attract these businesses of 50 and 500 people. Because we have something amazing here, we have to do what it takes and reduce the regulations and tell the story of what an amazing place Connecticut truly is.
For our second question, Mr. Greenberg, would you suggest altering either the state income tax or the corporate tax rate?
I believe this is a part of the question about what is going to make it attractive to bring people here into the state. What we know is our state income tax is about half of our budget. So to say we're going to start to reduce that burden, we can't do that immediately. We have to get our finances in order. We have to get rid of the waste, the fraud, and the abuse that has gone on here in the state of Connecticut for far too long. And then we can start to slowly reduce. We do not have the sweet spot. As a baseball player, I tried all the time to find that sweet spot. And Connecticut has tipped the barrier of overtaxation. And that's what's forcing people out of this state. In order to return to greatness, what Connecticut was when I grew up here 37 years ago, we have to reduce the burden. So we can do that by reducing the burden over time, by getting our finances in order first. That has to be addressed. We get rid of the waste, the fraud, and the abuse, and then we will have an opportunity to start to reduce the rest of the burden on the taxpayers here and then become attractive. Remember, Connecticut did not have a state income tax in 1990 and was one of the top 5 states in the entire country. Now we're relying on over half of our budget in our state income tax. We have far exceeded that sweet spot, and we're seeing revenues and businesses flee this state, so we must do something about it.
Your response, Christine Cohen.
Yeah, I would say that, we know we have a tax code issue, and we need to look at that. We created a tax panel several years ago. The Fiscal Stability Commission was created to take a look at that, and we should certainly keep an eye to that in the future. As Mr. Greenberg pointed out, I do not think cutting $10 billion out of an $18 billion budget is a possibility right now. I also know that we're feeling overtaxed and overburdened with that, so it's certainly not a good time to increase taxes. So what's the answer? The answer is growth, growing our way out and making sure that we increase our revenues by bringing back business to the state, and thereby relieving our tax burden for our residents here in Connecticut.
First rebuttal, Adam Greenberg.
Well, when we're talking about taxes and we cannot add any new taxes, that is why at this time, Connecticut taxpayers, Connecticut businesses, the trucking industry, they cannot impose another tax. And one of those taxes is tolls. And we know that 75% of all drivers here in the state of Connecticut, commissioned by the DOT study, the DOT rough study said 75% of all revenue derived from the tolls, a tax on the Connecticut taxpayers, is going to be from Connecticut residents. We also know that Connecticut is inefficient in how we operate divisions and our business at the state level. So we cannot commission another tax on this state, and we cannot have another department at the state level that is going to potentially mismanage and misuse and misappropriate those funds.
Your rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen?
Yeah, I mean, because tolls came up, I think I'll just speak to tolls for a minute. I think tolls are the best alternative on the table. And that's not to say if another alternative came up that I wouldn't want to put our thought to it and really be mindful about how to move forward. But knowing that there are 40% of out-of-state drivers passing over our roadways, knowing that we have 2 years left in the Special Transportation Fund, and we have severely deteriorating roadways and bridges, some on, I just don't want to see another Mianus Bridge situation. We really need to be mindful about getting money back into the Special Transportation Fund. And it's really about, it's a usage fee to me, and we have, like I said, we have 40% of out-of-state drivers going back and forth. So much so that business owners and CEOs that comprise the Fiscal Stability Commission task force even recommended that tolls be implemented in the state. Thank you.
So the DOT rough study that was commissioned, and we've had 3 studies to the tune of $4 million, showed that it was 75% will be in-state drivers. Only 25% will be from out-of-state drivers. How can we continue to burden the people here in Connecticut? And we're talking about the bridges. Listen, I drive on these roads. I drive on these bridges. There's been one-party rule for 38 of the last 40 years that has the money, and that money has been misappropriated.
We're actually in question 3 at this point.
Well, I don't think okay. Can I have another?
You're entitled to the first rebuttal of question 3, so we're right there.
Oh, question 3 is tolls?
Yes.
Oh, that's where we're at. Oh, okay. I would just say, do we need to take care of Connecticut drivers with tolls? We absolutely do. We need to make sure that we're providing Connecticut-issued easy passes, providing deep discounts to Connecticut drivers. We need to talk about tax credits so that those who are commuting are not overly burdened. And we need to be talking about lowering a gas tax that's not performing well for the state now in the advent of fuel-efficient and electric vehicles. So we need to be talking about that and recognizing finding that Connecticut residents are feeling burdened. But I also would just ask you, Mr. Greenberg, how you would say that we would fix our roadways and our bridges, because that's a big concern of mine. And I hope that everybody, just in terms of the special transportation fund, also recognizes the fact that that is a question on the ballot on November 6th about tightening up that lockbox. But I would just ask you how you would intend for the state to pay for all of the bridge and roadway repairs.
So I'd like to start with talking about the lottery and how that money was supposed to be going to use and funding our schools. I would also like to talk about the casinos that were supposed to do the same thing, the conveyance tax that was supposed to go to fund agriculture here in the state of Connecticut, and the gas tax that was supposed to be funding our bridges and our roads and our ports. Unfortunately, the people up in Hartford have chosen to misappropriate those funds. And the scary part about the ballot question that says this lockbox, the problem is before the money even enters, it can be diverted. So the Republicans have come up with a plan called Prioritize Progress, which is $70 billion over the course of the next 30 years to fund the roads.
Now, for a technical point here, that constituted the first and second responses to the question about do you support installing tolls on major highways and how should the revenues be used. You segued into that very nicely.
Can I ask one more question?
Well, right now you have the first rebuttal, so yes.
Okay. So I just would ask again how we would pay for the repairs to the bridges and roadways.
Right now, we have fraud, waste, and abuse going on in the state of Connecticut, and they have not prioritized where the money is going to be spent. We subsidized a busway from New Britain to Hartford. We subsidized a train line from New Haven to Springfield, taking people to a casino that we do not get anything from. We also subsidize on a daily basis, paying for those which we will not see a return on for over 100 years. Prioritizing progress means spending the money, reducing waste, fraud, and abuse, and then funding the things that matter most to us, and that is safety.
You responded to the question from Mrs. Cohen. In effect, that can be your entitled rebuttal, or you can rebut whatever was discussed prior to that. It's your choice.
I'm okay.
Oh, you're okay. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will go on to question number 4, and this will be Mr. Greenberg first responding on this. There will be 2 questions on the November ballot to amend our state constitution. The first would preserve the Special Transportation Fund, requiring it to be used exclusively for transportation purposes and require transportation revenues to be put into a lockbox. Do you support this?
I absolutely support the lockbox concept. However, what I just explained is there's always a way to divert funds prior to them entering the lockbox. This law needs to be written if the money is going to come from a specific source, like the gasoline tax. Then that money must enter the special transportation lockbox. It cannot be diverted under any circumstances. We have a rainy day fund for that, so we need to make sure that the ballot question is answered. Yes, we do. But as a legislator, I will go up and fight to make sure that that money will never, ever be allowed to be diverted outside the transportation fund.
First response from you.
Yeah, well, I'll answer
You're the
question.
second one.
Right, yeah. So yes, I unequivocally agree and believe that we need to tighten the lockbox on the Special Transportation Fund. And we need to ensure that we are funding the Special Transportation Fund for the improvement of our bridges and roadways, and hopefully for use towards expanding transportation infrastructure in the future.
Now we're at the first rebuttal. That's Mr. Greenberg.
We kind of agreed.
Okay.
Sorry.
Imagine that.
And you technically have the second rebuttal.
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay.
Next question.
It's nice to have such civility. Question number 5. The second ballot question would require the legislature to hold a public hearing prior to the transfer of state-owned property and their approval by a 2/3 vote of each chamber of the General Assembly. Do you support this? First response from Christine Cohen.
Yes, I absolutely support this. you know, what we saw happen years ago was an unfortunate land swap known as the Haddam land swap. And we want to prevent something like that happening in the middle of the night between a couple of parties in the legislature while no one else is aware. And we almost had something similar happen right here in the 12th district in 2013 at Hammonasset. So this question on the ballot prevents those sort of deals from happening and protects our land.
Mr. Greenberg, you have a second response here.
Dare I say I agree? I agree. I mean, it's really as simple as that. It's a simple question, and we cannot have these back-ended deals that affect a lot of people that only a few people have to go in and can vote on. So,
This is an unusual circumstances. That was the first rebuttal in which you agreed, but you have the right to a rebuttal, to his rebuttal, in which he agreed.
We can move on to
Are
the
you
next
following
question.
this?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, question 6. Adam Greenberg, you'll respond on this one. 34 states plus the District of Columbia permit some form of no excuse early voting, and 3 more conduct elections exclusively by mail. Would you support these or other ways of enabling maximum participation of eligible voters in Connecticut elections?
I think being able to vote is an honor and a privilege, and I think we need to do everything in our power to enable and ensure everyone has that opportunity to express themselves through a closed ballot system, which we have. No one's name is attached to any ballots, which gives you an opportunity to do what you feel is right, unannounced, and what makes you feel good. So for us to prevent somebody from being able to do that for a variety of reasons, I think is wrong. So we need to continue to ensure that all people have the ability to express themselves through a closed ballot system, and we need to open it up as best as we can, and keeping an eye on making sure that, of course, fraud doesn't happen and abusing that system. But I think there's enough good people that really deserve that opportunity, and we need to support that.
Christine Cohen, your response?
Yeah, I am also in support of early voting. We have a lot of working families, and this just provides more accessibility, and it quite frankly makes it fair so that people can truly exercise their right to vote.
Mr. Greenberg, your rebuttal?
No.
It's going to sound strange. Christine Cohen, your rebuttal to
Next
his
question
non-rebuttal?
is fine, thank you.
Question 7, Christine Cohen, you will be going first. Do you support any changes to Connecticut's current gun legislation?
I do. I think we need to bring the ghost gun bill through the legislature. I hope to see a ban on ghost guns. We should not be able to order 80% of a gun off the internet and build an automatic or a semi-automatic weapon at home. So I absolutely want to see tightening of gun laws with respect to ghost guns, for example. I also think we need to do something about legislation with regard to mental health and illness. I have heard from many in the community who are very concerned, caregivers for the mentally ill, who are gun owners because prior to becoming mentally ill were able to have a gun permit. So we need to be looking to safety for our families and our children, and I believe by tightening some of our common sense gun laws and bringing forth new common sense gun legislation is important to protect our children and families.
Adam Greenberg, your response?
I think Connecticut has done a fantastic job, acted swiftly, effectively, and they've done something to the tune of having the second tightest gun regulations in the entire country. Our safety is as important as anything that we all have. And I commend Connecticut and the legislature for doing just that, acting as swiftly and effectively as they have. With that being said, I will agree with Christine in the fact that ghost guns are a big problem and something that also needs to be handled at the federal level. because without a serial number, that's making an illegal weapon. So we should definitely look at that. I want to point out there are a lot of law-abiding gun owners, and I'm not going to turn my back on those law-abiding gun owners just to push legislation through. What we do have in this country is a situation where gun safety is a problem and mental health is a problem. But in the state of Connecticut, with the tightest or the second tightest gun regulations, I asked the question to the legislature, why then was mental health funding pulled? Why can we not figure out what's so important? We're talking about bridges that are potentially going to collapse. We're talking about these individuals with mental health. We need to do a better job. If there's an incident, I look at myself in the mirror and say, I let someone down. And we need to look in the mirror as legislators and leaders and make sure we take that approach to this situation and far deeper for being able to help protect and secure all of our futures.
Christine Cohen, your rebuttal?
Yeah, this is just a point where I know we talked about this the other night, and this is something that's been going on for the past couple of days, but the distinction between Mr. Greenberg and I is that I am a common sense gun safety advocate. I have been endorsed by groups. I'm very proud of these endorsements by Moms Demand Action, a lot of whom are here tonight, as well as Connecticut Against Gun Violence. And that is because I am an advocate for common sense gun safety and legislation. And I hear Mr. Greenberg saying he is for that as well, yet he's accepted the endorsement of the CCDL, who has come out and said that they do not agree with some of our common sense gun safety legislation, such as the Sandy Hook bill, which was a bipartisan bill, such as the bump stock bill, and such as they would like to arm teachers using Title IV funds, just like, sorry.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
I'm a father of two young sons, Leo Henry and Ryder Benjamin. I grew up here in this town in Guilford. I raised my kids in Branford. I am all for gun safety. I have supported Connecticut and the legislature, and I have stood up proud and tall and said, I am not for arming teachers. I am not for repealing the assault weapons ban, and I am not for rolling back background checks. So while there is a group that has endorsed me without me seeking that endorsement, I will not turn my back to 10,000 law-abiding gun owners that live in this district who just want to have an open door policy. I will be a senator that will have an open door to all. And that is what this is about, unifying and bringing people together. And that is the senator that I'm going to be.
Can I respond to that?
I'll defer. Yes.
I just then would ask, I mean, there are, I hear what you're saying, that you didn't seek the endorsement, and assuming that's true, there were 14 out of 72 senatorial candidates that were given the distinction of a CCDL endorsement, which is Connecticut's version of the NRA. And you're saying you're for all of these things, but you will not disavow this very extreme gun group. And I, too, am for law-abiding citizens, and I, too, will have an open door. I have to stop.
Mr. Greenberg, you can rebut that.
I did not fill out a questionnaire. I did not seek the endorsement. When the CCDL looked at myself and Ms. Cohen, they looked at an individual that will represent all people truly with an open door. And with the 10,000 law-abiding gun owners here in the 12th District, my door will be open to have a communication with them and anyone else who comes into my office up in Hartford. And I will represent all.
Am I allowed to speak again to that?
I'll defer to the league.
Okay. I would just say that I am not an anti-Second Amendment person. My door will be open to all. I do not understand why the CCDL looked at both of us and decided that your door would be open to them. You were one of 14 out of 72 candidates, so it still perplexes me as to why that happened. It also perplexes me as to why you will not disavow their endorsement.
Mr. Greenberg.
There's a chance that my background, who's been in the public light my entire life. I wrote a book called Get Up, The Art of Perseverance. I do motivational speaking, and I own a nutrition business that's nationwide that helps people live a proactive versus reactive lifestyle. Maybe it's because I was looked at as somebody with true character, and the words that I say, I choose them wisely. I do not attack people, and I do not make false claims about somebody just to do so.
Our eighth question, addressed first to Adam Greenberg. Do you think it's necessary to change Connecticut law to maintain or improve access to health care, either now or if the Affordable Care Act is repealed?
Health care is a huge concern. I personally spend over $2,000 a month in health insurance. And we have so many seniors that are being crippled with the healthcare costs, and young people who can't afford it, business owners that cannot afford to provide it to their employees. We have a major problem here in this country. And the expenses that we're throwing on these providers and the costs that we're covering for so many people is crippling this country as a whole. We need to work together at formulating a solution. We have the greatest country in the entire world. But when I say that, we're losing it. We're losing the battle. We have to band together in a bipartisan manner and bringing everyone to the table. We can do this. But we can't just force it down somebody's throat and say we have the best answer. It's about working together. And that's something that we need so desperately here in this country.
Your response, Mrs. Cohen.
Yeah, I alluded to this before. I have always been able to provide my employees with health insurance. I had been able to for many years, paying 100% of my full-time employees' health insurance. And gradually, as the cost of health insurance rose, that became increasingly difficult to do. Over time, the percentage that we were able to pay for declined in order for us to be able to run our business successfully. And eventually, with 40%, 50% rate hikes year over year, we became unable to provide health insurance to our full-time employees. We did other things to ensure that we kept our great team of workers because that was really important to us. So we provided them with a 401k matching system and provided them with paid time off, but health insurance no longer was a possibility. And so my husband and I moved to our own plan where we pay $1,500 a month with a $15,000 deductible. So I'm paying in excess of $30,000 per year for what I consider to be a junk plan, except it's a premium junk plan because I'm paying gobs of money for that. I get very little coverage for what I pay. And I know this is the story for so many of us here in this room. I know this is the story for so many people. We need to start looking at a public option in Connecticut, and we can do that right here without having to affect a federal law change. We do that by looking to plans like the one we offer to municipalities called the Partnership Plan. It's a great plan, and that's something that we should look at as a legislature to bring forward and offer to businesses and individuals within the state of Connecticut.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
The Affordable Care Act is not affordable, and too many people are struggling. So once again, I'm just going to continue to say it's about bringing everyone together, having the conversations about what we can do, yes, as a state, because this can be something that the state can help, but it's going to take a lot more than just the state demanding what we do. So as a state senator, I will be open to conversations to fixing the healthcare crisis that's going on in the state of Connecticut, because I will agree with Ms. Cohen. For the amount of money that I spend for the Affordable Care Act and the health insurance that I have, it's not affordable and it costs me a fortune anytime something happens. So we definitely need to look into this much deeper and find a solution for all of you here in the 12th and the rest of the state.
Mrs. Cohen, your rebuttal.
Yeah, and I would just add that I'm terrified for our families and our senior population, and quite frankly for my family, if we were to remove pre-existing conditions as a qualification. We would have a crisis on our hands. So we need to do everything we can right now. It's an urgent matter, and it deserves the attention in the next legislative session.
Question 9.
Do I get to say something on, or no? Did I miss that one? I would just like to point out pre-existing condition is something that is near and dear to my heart and my family. So I stand here to say that I will fight for every single person to not lose coverage and to make sure that they have the ability to be covered with a pre-existing condition. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 9, first to respond will be Christine Cohen. Do you support paid family and medical leave? Please explain why or why not.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I will tell you about personal situations that I've had. I saw my father through an illness and his death. I have experienced issues myself, being on bed rest with my first son and working at the time, and know that it can be a struggle to balance not wanting to leave your job and have that pay, that daily pay that some of us really count on and need. And also, you know, on the other side of things, from a business standpoint, as a business owner, knowing, like I said, the value in creating a team that stays with you. I can tell you our baker and our some of our front of the house staff that are our full-time employees have been with us almost since the day we opened 15 years ago. And that's because we want to take care of our employees. You want to build a team that cares about the business, you know, where they're working. And you do that by providing them understanding and the pay and the time off that they need to take care of their families and take care of themselves so that they can come back to your business being refreshed and ready to go as one of the team.
Your response, Adam Greenberg.
I am all for that conversation. Here's the issue that I have. As an employee, and the proposal right now is you must pay into it, no matter how old or young, no matter how many jobs you have or not. And it's a use it or lose it system. Additionally, the state of Connecticut has proposed it like a startup business. We don't have $20 million to put forth and try to figure this out, where other states are struggling to fund their own paid FMLA. I'm all for a team. I'm all for doing what's right. But we also cannot just burden people because we have a good idea. There are companies in the private sector that are trying to pull the option for people and employees to pay into it, an option for the employer to match it, with the state providing tax credits when the employee and the employer does that. Those are real, solid, possible solutions. But the state of Connecticut must get out of its way. Businesses are trying the best that they can. We do not need another layer of government mandating what the state must do. And we have an opportunity to look deeper into this. I'm all for team. I'm all for unity. I'm all for doing what's right. And we can do that if we truly have a solution and not just a reactionary, I have a good idea.
Your rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen?
Yeah, I would just say that family medical leave is an issue that disproportionately affects people of color and women, and we really need to be mindful of that and do everything we can to move towards a solution. As a small business owner, I know that that can be burdensome, and so we need to look to the proper ways to implement these programs. Maybe it is having employees pay a small percentage into their paychecks. Maybe through removing other barriers for business, they're able to allow for family medical leave to happen without such a burden on their shoulders. But we need to get there, and this, again, is an issue that should really be addressed in the next legislative session.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
I'll just reiterate what I said. I'm all for doing what's right, helping our women, our people of color, our minorities, helping everyone. This is not picking and choosing. This is just doing what's right. But we must make the right choice, the right decision, with the right plan. The time is now to have those conversations, but not to rush into it. As a legislator, our job, truly, more than anything, is to make sure we do not push bad legislation through. We stop it, far more than pushing good legislation. So what we need to do is make sure we have all the facts, all the details, and lift up and uncover every possible scenario to do what's right by the employee and the employer and the burden that it could potentially lead on the state of Connecticut.
Question 10.
I would like to have a rebuttal.
30 seconds.
As a small business owner, I have employed anywhere from 30 to 50 employees at a time, and currently have 32 employees that I'm taking care of day in and day out. I'm responsible for their payroll. And I know that they depend on this work. I know that they need that paycheck. And I worry that if something happens in their family, they'd be unable to care for their family because they would choose work. And that is just not acceptable.
I believe Mr. Greenberg would be entitled to 30 seconds additional.
Yeah, I will say it again. As a business owner myself, and as Christine's saying, it's hard enough to supply our employees with health insurance. Yet we're talking about another burden on the employer. We just have to come to a solution, something that makes sense for all. So until the burden is released from the business owner, we cannot impose a mandate on them. We all know that our employees want to work and they have to work and they rely on it. Let's just come up with a comprehensive plan to do so.
Our 10th question, addressed first to Adam Greenberg. How should the legislature address the systemic inequity in the funding of public education?
Prioritizing spending. I'll use the town of Madison for example. The town of Madison sends over $61 million to the state of Connecticut up to Hartford, of which only $1.5 million came back to the town of Madison, of which $0 were sent back for education. How is that telling the state of Connecticut that they are in support of education? There has to be a better way. If we're saying we're going to prioritize our roads and our bridges, we must do so. If we're saying education truly is important to us, then let's do so. 38 out of the last 40 years, the same people that have been in control of the money have not funded these programs. So what we need to do is start the conversation of change. And I'm really proud that last year, 2 years ago, when the numbers started getting close and the conversation actually included both sides of the aisle, that is how there was a bipartisan budget that was passed. We need to continue making sure no matter what the numbers are, conversations happen and people are going to stand up strong and firm for education, because somebody who has 2 young kids that are getting ready to go through the education system here in the state of Connecticut, it is so important to me. I had tremendous experience growing up going to Guilford Lakes, Baldwin Middle School, Adams Middle School, and Guilford High School. We need to make sure we provide that to the next generation, and we can do it with prioritizing education as truly being important and putting our money where our mouth is and not just saying we're for education.
Your response, Christine Cohen?
Yeah, I worry about this. Obviously, I am a Guilford Board of Education member and have worked very hard to create bipartisan balanced budgets. It's very difficult to do that when education funding is in question. And then when education funding is in question, you worry about how you're going to continue to pay the teachers, bring on new teachers, pay for new programming that you want to develop. We're under a contractual obligation for 80% of our education budget through teacher contracts. So there's a very small amount of the budget with which to affect any change. We have a minimum budget requirement required by state law, which is a very good thing. You want your budget, your education budget, to increase year over year because we want to invest in our schools. They are the most important asset that we have. In the 12th district, a lot of legislators will look on and say, that's a wealthy district. You don't need that ECS funding. I want to be your legislator. I want to be up there protecting our funding. And my job is to educate other legislators on why it's so necessary to protect that funding. The Republican budget that got vetoed last year was going to present the largest education budget cut in American history. It was going to obliterate UConn funding. And I really worry about what's going to happen with the state of our education system, quite frankly, with the prioritized progress plan that is being touted as being so beneficial. That bonding that they want to remove is bonding for K through 12 schools. It's very important that we make sure that we're protecting education funding in the state. In this district alone, in Branford, we can see that Branford public schools are at 25% free and reduced.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
So UConn was brought up, and it is our flagship university, something that we should be proud of. But here's one question that I have. 20 administrators at our public flagship university are making more than $6 million per year. So when we're talking about prioritizing spending, I got to ask, what's going on up there? And when we're talking about budgets, there's one party that's been in control of where they're sending the money, and we're losing teachers in droves. Teachers saying, I can't even buy paper. Really? In the state of Connecticut, you have to come out of pocket to buy paper and pens? We got an issue here, and it's called prioritizing. And the waste, the fraud, and the abuse needs to stop so we can truly educate our kids statewide, because everyone deserves that opportunity.
Your rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen.
Yeah, that Republican budget that was vetoed also would have really done away with the state college system as well as our community college system. It was in jeopardy. It also added a 2% teacher tax. Our teachers, we need to be supporting them. These are teachers that are with our children day in and day out. They deserve the world. And that's what we need to be focused on. We need to be focused on how are we going to support the people that have our children's livelihood in their hands day in and day out. They are creating our next generations for us, and we need to be mindful of that when we're looking to education dollars.
Question 11, first to Christine Cohen. Can steps be taken to ensure that our educated and skilled young people remain here?
Yes, absolutely. I think by helping business, we need to remove barriers to entry and growth for business, thereby generating new jobs and making sure that there is a job and talent match is incredibly important. What we know is that in the state of Connecticut, we have an extremely well-educated population, but there seems to be a mismatch between the jobs that are available and the way in which people are educated. So we have created all of these jobs, for instance, in technology or at Electric Boat, and we're hearing that they're having trouble finding the talent for those programs. Now, in Connecticut, we've come up with some programs to alleviate some of that, like the manufacturing pipeline that just began last month. And that is a step in the right direction. But we need to continue to make sure that we're educating our youth to provide the right applicants for these jobs.
Mr. Greenberg, your response.
Yeah, for one, we all know that the cost of living here and young people to graduate college is really high. So a Learn Here, Live Here program where tax incentives are provided to kids to come out of schools and be able to buy their first home is really important. But I'll agree that we do need to have a better infrastructure in place where we're helping these businesses work within our universities, 46 of them statewide. And we need our STEM systems and our vocational schools to be able to train the workforce truly for what tasks and jobs that we have. We have the #3 fiber optics network in the entire country. We have the Electric Boat. We have Pratt & Whitney. We still have Sikorsky. Thankfully, we still do have these resources and these amazing businesses. We need to do a better job of unifying and bringing them together, helping to deregulate and give incentives to create programs within these universities that these kids can truly have internships to train themselves. So as soon as they graduate, they have their job. And Connecticut needs to support that with certain things like that Learn Here, Live Here, tax incentives, credits, and really bring the youth up, create these cities, get them more vibrant. And the only way to do so is bringing everyone to the table and allowing these businesses to flourish and utilizing these resources and the tremendous minds that we have here in the state of Connecticut.
Mrs. Cohen, your rebuttal.
Yeah, I've been out knocking thousands of doors, and what I'm hearing from millennials or parents of children who have just graduated from college is that they want to be able to get to and fro with ease. They want to be able to have transportation that takes them to their new jobs. They want to be able to enjoy transit-oriented development, the types of businesses that are right off those railways and busways. And we need to look to transportation improvements as well as job creation. I also think that we could certainly do something around college debt forgiveness. Working here, staying in the job for a number of years, and then work towards helping those students pay off the exorbitant costs of college education, which we all know has just gotten out of control.
Mr. Greenberg, your rebuttal.
I agree with infrastructure, and I agree with looking into expanding potentially airports, not at the expense and taking somebody's home, but we need to look at what more can we do. Shoreline East has been tremendous for the shore, taking 2,000 cars off the road, making it easier for people to get to and from work. And it's those types of things that we need to continue as a state to look to help to lure and attract these businesses to be here and the young people to have these opportunities to get to and from work.
Question 12, first to Adam Greenberg. What is your position on raising our state's minimum wage?
So I think the conversation really needs to be about living wage. Because when we're talking about raising a minimum wage, what we're ultimately doing is we're getting rid of our youth employment. Because there's a lot of people and a lot of business owners that hire seasonal workers. And those seasonal workers are high school and college people. And what we need to do is reduce the burden on these businesses so they could potentially be able to afford a living wage. Now, $15 an hour is not a living wage here in the state of Connecticut. We know that. So we need, as I mentioned earlier, roughly 9,000 business regulations and 300 taxes. That's the bigger question. That's the bigger problem. That's the burden that's on people. Not just about raising the minimum wage, because I'm all for paying somebody for equal work, equal value, no matter who they are. but we're going to squeeze out our youth employment. So before we just say we're going to raise the minimum wage, we have to include everyone into that conversation, including the youth, the middle class, the old, the elderly, everyone. We have to have that conversation and not just put a mandate on a $15 minimum wage on all employers, no questions asked.
Your response?
Yeah, as a
Cohen.
business owner in the district that employs a lot of Guilford and Madison's youth, I would say we absolutely need to get to a $15 minimum wage. We need to do it in a smart way that has business in mind, helping them with other barriers to growth, such as the business entity tax, or certain businesses pay into unemployment insurance. And in the state of Connecticut, we now have a healthy unemployment fund, but our income wage base, or taxable wage base, is still $15,000, which to some people who aren't business owners, if you lower that taxable wage base, it alleviates some of the burden on employers. So I'm just pointing that out and as one of the options to alleviate some of the burdens on small business and provide a way for us to get to a $15 minimum wage and then increasing the minimum wage with inflation.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
So once again, I'll bring up the lottery, the gas tax, the conveyance tax, as things that we're supposed to do, and they were supposed to go here. So while we're talking about we need to do these things and deregulate and get rid of some of the burdens, until we do those things, we can't just put forth an increase in minimum wage. We have to take our first step forward. And what it's going to take is taking the actions first before we present and put a mandate on what the minimum wage should be. Once we reduce these regulations and make it easier and less burdensome, then we can have those conversations, but we can't do that before we actually deregulate and make it easier for these businesses.
Your rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen.
Well, we already do have a mandate on the minimum wage. And right now, $10.10 an hour is not enough for a living wage. For people to live, to pay rent, and to buy their groceries, it's a problem. So we need to be mindful of that. I know Mr. Greenberg the other night in a forum spoke to our poverty level in Connecticut, and we need to be addressing that poverty level, and this is a way to do that. We're not talking about going to a $15 minimum wage overnight. That would be troublesome. It would be very difficult for businesses to swallow that all at once. But we definitely need to lean in and have a plan to move forward to address poverty in this state.
Question 13, first to Christine Cohen. Would you support changing any of the state's business regulations?
Yes, I would. And, some of them are so industry specific. I have been visiting business after business to really get an understanding because I don't want to live in a bubble. I own a bagel shop. And so I have regulations that I need to deal with day in and day out, which are very different from the regulations that, say, an ophthalmologist has to deal with day in and day out. And there are some concerns that, when I speak to physicians that own their own practice, they have a set of concerns that they have brought to me. And when I speak to others like me, like bakery owners or retail establishments that sell clothing or hardware stores, they all are presented with a different set of regulations, biomedical. Now, not all regulations are bad. In fact, regulations always come about because we're trying to do something good. But we all know that as years pass, or sometimes even months pass, we say, oops, maybe that wasn't the direction that we want to go in. And so we need to be reviewing those regulations. We need to be talking and listening to business owners to understand what regulations are really impacting them. I will say again that I do think across the board we should eliminate the business entity tax. I do not think that's a tax that, I just think it's cumbersome regardless of the size of the business, you pay for it. And I think it's something that we should look to eliminate and really help small business growth, provide some fertile soil on which businesses can grow in the state of Connecticut.
Your response, Adam Greenberg.
9,000 of them. There's a lot that are outdated. There are a lot that people don't even understand what they are. One example is in moving heavy equipment. We, in the state of Connecticut, for some reason, is the only state that has an 80,000 pound maximum. The rest of the states have a 99,000 pound, the ability to move 99,000 pounds. That puts Connecticut at a deficit when trying to compete. We have regulations and permits that you have to have, and the state departments close at 4 p.m. And if you need to move a piece of equipment and you can't get in touch with them, you have to leave your piece of equipment unattended because you couldn't get the proper permitting. There are regulations that just need to be looked into, and when we're talking so many, 9,000, we need to have a department that legitimately handles that. Because when you talk to business owners in the hospitality industry, they're saying ridiculous things. I have to have somebody check in and then check out as a waitress and then do this. There's just things that would make you crazy. Because as a business owner myself, looking and talking to these business owners throughout the district, you're going, oh my God, I can't believe this has happened and this has gone on for so long. And there's not been a voice to carry that message to Hartford and actually do anything to take action. So as a state senator, that's something that I will pride myself on, is taking that voice, taking that message, and engaging in trying to understand what was going on when the regulation was made, and then how to work at reducing or changing the regulation so our state is not a predator, we're a partner. And I'll say this, if one of our truckers are found to have anything over the 80,000 pounds, they have to pay $1 per pound, not just over, but $1 per pound. So if it's 81,000 pounds, Connecticut's fining them $81,000.
Your rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen.
Yeah, I would just reiterate, as a Connecticut business owner who has many employees in the state of Connecticut, I understand the regulatory barriers that businesses are presented with, and I understand that there are issues that affect us industry-wide, or from industry to industry rather, and then there are issues that affect certain industries specifically. And we need to be talking and listening and collaborating to figure out how we remove the appropriate barriers so that Connecticut businesses can grow and thrive.
Thank you. Question 14, first to Adam Greenberg. Will you support the restoration of $145 million to the dedicated Clean Energy Fund that last year's legislature moved into the general fund?
Can you repeat the question?
Will you support the restoration of $145 million to the dedicated Clean Energy Fund that last year's legislature moved into the general fund?
So I think that this gets back to where we're prioritizing. Clean energy is something that is a priority and needs to be here in the state of Connecticut. So I 100% support, instead of putting the money into the general fund, if we're going to support clean energy, let's actually do that, because that's the wave of the future. There are a lot of farmers here in the state of Connecticut that are relying on this clean energy as a new revenue source for them to be able to fund their farm. Because as I mentioned earlier, the conveyance tax that's supposed to fund agriculture is going into the general fund. So I think what we have here in the state of Connecticut is a misappropriation, because when there's irresponsible spending, money gets diverted outside of where it's supposed to be intended use for and sent into the general fund. And we know where that's gotten us. So prioritizing where the money is going, as somebody who actually has solar panels on my house, I think it's very important, and it's the wave of the future, and we need to invest in that next wave and next generation.
Your response, Christine Cohen.
as I said earlier, the environment is one of our most valuable assets here in Connecticut, and we need to be doing everything we can to protect that asset. I've been very concerned over recent reports coming out of the UN Climate Committee and understanding that we only have a few years with which to affect change, and unfortunately, a federal government that's not willing to do anything about it. And so we need to ensure that we are protecting our state right here, protecting our environmental assets, and that means a restoration to that clean energy fund. That means making sure we're incentivizing companies for using clean energy. That might mean a carbon tax. That might mean a cap and trade program. It means that we need to move forward in a responsible manner. And it also means that each one of us as individuals should do all that we possibly can to help our environment day in and day out. And I'm probably preaching to the choir here because I suspect many of us in this room are as responsible as we can be from an environmental standpoint. I know that this is something we've taken to heart in my business. We've just switched to paper straws, and for many, many years have just provided compostable materials and done all we can to be responsible to our environment and to our community. I would love to see some programs incentivizing other businesses to go in that direction as well. So I'm proud because I am endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters, and I suspect that it's because I am dedicated to this issue, and I absolutely, unequivocally would like to see a restoration of that fund.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Greenberg.
I believe 100% in our scientists, and we need to do more, and we can be advocates of doing more. And I'll also say we need to make sure that we, right now, currently don't have any fracking going on in the state of Connecticut. We need to write legislation to ensure that fracking will never be allowed in the state of Connecticut. And I know we have a lot of town ordinance that restrict even the movement of fracking waste through their towns. We need to do more statewide to ensure that Connecticut residents do not ever have to worry about fracking waste coming through the state of Connecticut. We also need to have more conversations on single-use plastic bags, on single-use plastic straws, and single-use plastic cocktail straws. There's a whole lot we can do, and we need to start having those deeper conversations and bringing in the businesses to implement change, and we can do it because our environment truly is our #1 greatest resource and asset that we all have been given.
Mrs. Cohen, your rebuttal.
I don't have one.
Okay, thank you very much. Question 15, first to Christine Cohen. Net metering of solar has been an essential part of growing residential solar energy in Connecticut. But in 2018, the legislature voted to repeal it. Do you agree with that decision? If not, what will you do to reverse this legislation?
Well, I do think it's an issue. It's an issue that warrants probably more research on it than I have done. I am not a solar panel. I do not have solar panels on my home. I wish I did. I intend to work with companies and individuals who have solar panels to make sure that we're doing and providing the best that we can for those individuals. And in fact, I know that many of our farms and like Bishop's right here has a solar array, which is wonderful. I do know that we've provided wonderful programs in the state of Connecticut around dump capping and ensuring that we provide solar arrays in that way, and we need to make sure that we're incentivizing those programs going forward.
Your response, Adam Greenberg.
So I believe net metering is where whatever you create from an energy standpoint, you can actually sell and reuse yourself, and if you don't, you can sell it, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think if that is the case, of course we need to make sure that we ensure if you're creating something and you have something on your property, without a doubt, especially for these farms, and I bring that up because our farming industry and our agriculture is essential to our life. And those that have allowed all of their land to be used for farming, we need to ensure that we're doing everything in our power to help them and not just take from them. We have to work together so if they're creating power, they have the ability to sell that power back and lessen the burden on themselves and what they've created.
Your rebuttal, Mrs. Cohen?
No rebuttal.
None rebuttal? And you don't have a rebuttal to the rebuttal, or you have a rebuttal to
I
anything
think I'm
else?
good on that one.
Okay, we'll go on to question 16. First response will be from Adam Greenberg. Is there an additional topic you would like to address? And we would have 2 minutes each with no rebuttal.
Who are we as a state and as a district? What type of people and what type of legacy do we want to provide our children? That's the question that we all are facing. Our country is at the biggest, most divisive state, certainly in my lifetime. And while I can talk about a specific topic of change that needs to happen, the biggest change that needs to happen is the character and the voice that needs to be represented in politics, not just this election, but in politics in general. What we cannot do is continue down a path of negativity and divisiveness. As somebody who prides myself on motivating and inspiring people, young and old, I chose to do this, not for glory, not for the money. I chose to do this because I've been given so much support in my lifetime. So many people have helped me, motivate me, and inspire me. And it's amazing being here in the Guilford Community Center, where I grew up. I remember giving and delivering a speech after I graduated from college and just joined the ranks of the Chicago Cubs minor league team to talk to the people of this district. And here I am, now having an opportunity bigger than ever to represent everyone here that's given me so much. And I so ask for your vote on November 6th so I can take who I am for the last 37 years of my life and what you all have given me, which is so much. I ask of you to give me that opportunity, give me that chance to be your voice, young and old, business owners or not, and be your voice up in Hartford. So I just want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for today, and thank you for the last 7 months ever since I announced that I was going to run. So thank you.
Mrs. Cohen, you have 2 minutes and no rebuttal if you care to use it.
Is this
On any topic.
okay? Is this the closing or
No.
This is okay.
This is an
Okay.
additional.
Well, I would just say I love the topic of bipartisanship, so I'll take Mr. Greenberg's lead because I have been so proud of my service on the Guilford Board of Education, and I just think it's a model for how to behave in a bipartisan manner. You'd be really hard-pressed to figure out on which side of the aisle any member of the Guilford Board of Education sits on. And that's because we take the vow very seriously to operate in the best interest of our youth and our community. And the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? Because we have been ranked 4th by the state's Accountability Index rankings in the state, behind only Greenwich, New Canaan, and Darien, all of whom spend significantly more per student than we do, to the tune of about $4,000 per student. So it's not an insignificant amount. And it's what the results are of acting in a bipartisan manner for the good of your community. So I have the experience to do that, the know-how to get it done, and I hope as a result that you will vote for me on November 6th.
Thank you. We have time for some questions that come from the audience. The first one is, well, there's only 300 people here, but we'll try to be selective. An additional topic or an additional point about plans for the environment. Specifically, what do you view as needs for shoreline conservation and wetlands?
For me.
The first one goes to you. Yes,
Okay.
Christine McCollum.
Yeah, I think we've done a really great job, generally speaking, in the 12th district of coming up with shoreline resilience plans. And I think we could really look at a couple of the towns here in particular as a model. And I know Guilford, because I am a resident here, has done a superb job with their shoreline resilience plan. I think we really need to be talking about living shorelines and creating living shorelines for those on the water, and working really with our Department of Environmental Protection to see what the best course of action is for each individual town. But it's certainly a concern of anybody in the shoreline towns in the 12th district.
Mr. Greenberg?
I think we kind of addressed this with, as somebody who grew up clamming, crabbing, fishing, going to Bishop's Orchard and picking blueberries, raspberries, pumpkins, and you name it. Our environment and what we have and our resources is tremendous. And talking about ways in which we can prevent and protect our environment with the banning of plastic straws and single-use cocktail straws and having the conversation about plastic bags. Those are just a few of the things. But continuing, of course, to work with the Department of Environmental Protection. And as we've spoken so much about deregulating businesses, I want to make sure that I continue to reiterate deregulating businesses not at the expense of the environment, because I sure want Leo, Henry, and Ryder Benjamin to have the same opportunities to do the clamming and the fishing and the crabbing and feel comfortable to be able to eat the stuff out of the sound. Because we have a tremendous resource here, and I sure want to see them be able to enjoy it.
Rebuttal, Christine Cohen.
No, I would just add again, I think the question was specific to what we're doing in the shoreline communities. And so we really need to be mindful of those living along the shoreline. I've heard from a lot of homeowners of their concerns. It's definitely a big concern for people, residents right here in the 12th district, and impacts us greatly. So we need to be having conversations with the leads in each town, with the engineers in each town, around our shoreline resilience plans and how we are going to address rising water levels going forward.
Another question from the audience, and this first response will come from Adam Greenberg. What is your stance on legalization of marijuana?
Really? So I'm glad you used the term legalization of marijuana, because as Rick Maynard, who is the Town Park and Recreational Department head here in Guilford, he pointed out something that I hold near and dear to my heart, and that term recreational marijuana use. I will never use that, because marijuana is not a recreational sport. Recreation is something that young kids do and participate in, and recreation is fun and activities. And I know there's a lot of conversations about legalizing marijuana, but I think what happens is Connecticut has done a fantastic job with medicinal use and being able to regulate marijuana. As soon as legalization happens, what ultimately happens is the ability for somebody to grow, and now you're creating, because you have something that's taxed and regulated, you have something that's going to potentially be undercut. And we look at the leaders in this, and that's Colorado. They saw a huge spike in revenue creation, and that was great. But what ensued was watching homelessness go up, unemployment go up, and crime go up. We also know that the THC levels are way higher, and they affect the human brain than they were years ago. So before I use the term let's legalize marijuana, we have a whole lot of work to do, and not just look at let's just try to grab some money, because unfortunately that is what is being looked at. There's a bigger concern and there's a bigger issue here, and it needs to be addressed before it's legalized.
Christine Cohen, your response?
Yeah, revenue should never take place before good public policy does. So revenue should never be a driver. And so that is first and foremost. If we went towards legalization, I would need to know that we had good public policy in place. So these are the big questions. What does overuse look like? When I'm out talking to law enforcement about the possibility of legalization of marijuana, that's a big concern. What happens at a traffic stop when they pull somebody over? What does that look like? How do we dispense the marijuana that we legalize? Are we keeping it within dispensaries, or can anybody sell it now on the street? These are questions that we absolutely need to address and ask. I am a parent of 3 young children. I am a person who has a lot of addiction in my family, and I am concerned about the legalization of marijuana. We are bordered by states that this is the direction that they've chosen to go in, and we may be headed there as well. So good public policy must be in place to make sure that our youth are not getting their hands on marijuana. That's why if we did support the legalization, we should talk about dispensing the marijuana only through dispensaries, where it can be highly regulated, where we don't have high levels of THC hitting the market. We need to be talking about this. We need to be talking as a community about this. I met with Guilford Day last week, Developmental Assets for Youth, and was presented with study upon study about how this could be really detrimental to our community. And our next state senator needs to be reviewing all of this material and taking it into account for the good of our community.
Rebuttal?
Should I high five a bipartisanship? Thank you. No rebuttal.
Okay. And then I assume that you don't have a rebuttal to the non-rebuttal.
I don't.
Each candidate will now have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Mrs. Cohen, you may go first, please.
Well, I just want to end by saying that I love Connecticut. We are a state that is so rich in environmental assets, from our beaches and our parks to our trails and in our open space. The list goes on and on. We're a state with some of the finest educational institutions, top hospitals and physicians. We have it really good in Connecticut. I want to see Connecticut get back on track fiscally once again. I have the leadership experience, the bipartisan leadership skills, and the problem-solving abilities to help Connecticut get back on track. I've spent most of my life in Connecticut, the last 17 years right here in the 12th District. It's my home, it's our home, and I want it to be the best it can be. I've dedicated my life to giving back to the community, from my nonprofit work to my work on various boards and commissions to most recently as an elected member of the Guilford Board of Education. I give back because I believe in my community. I know that together we can bring about positive change and renewal for our state. And I just want to end by saying that I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting the debate tonight. Thank you to the moderator. And also thank you all for being here. This is a great crowd given the stormy weather that we are experiencing outside.
Mr. Greenberg, your closing statement, please.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters also, and thank you so much for moderating. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Christine, for a great debate. I want to reiterate, Connecticut has been knocked down. I think everyone in here feels the burden, and it's weighing on everyone's back. I want to take everyone on my back, because when there's a fire or a challenge, I don't run away from it. I run right towards it, and that's what I'm doing this for, because I grew up here in Guilford, in the 12th District, and you all will never understand how much you have given to me and my family. And I want to be able to give that back and then some. I feel so blessed. I've had such amazing experiences, highs and lows. Been knocked down, suffered traumatic injuries, but kept fighting. And through the support and guidance, I was able to make it back to the top. Everything I do, from the work that I do with my wife and our nonprofit that we started, to the motivational speaking engagements, to the work that I do with my company. It's all to try to give back what I've been given. And as your next senator, I vow and promise to carry that voice with me to Hartford every single day. This is not just a hobby or a good idea. I have a passion for helping. And I want this so bad because the conversations that I've had, the people that I've met, they deserve more. And on November 6th, I ask of you, please cast your vote for Adam Greenberg to be your next state senator, and I promise to represent all people. Thank you so much for coming.
One final note on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the East Shore. You can both come up here if you wish. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the East Shore, we want to thank the candidates for participating in this debate and this fabulous audience for attending. The League of Women Voters reminds us that democracy is not a spectator sport. We urge everyone to become informed and to vote on Election Day, Tuesday, November 6th. The regular polling places will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. For our Branford viewers, live election night coverage will begin immediately after the polls close on BCTV. I'm Ken Bennett for BCTV, NHTV, and the League of Women Voters. Thank you, and please be sure to vote. I have to tell you, I fought a 20 apple.